Greetings, everybody. Let's see where this week's adventure is going to take us. Imagine, if you will, that you are a mystic, an astronomer, an astrologer, and it is your function to pay attention to those moving stars that travel across our sky each evening. And the reason why is because people are counting on you to let them know what are the messages that these traveling lights are sharing with one another, that we ourselves may need to tune into. So here we are. It's nighttime. Over the past number of weeks, what you've noticed is that there has been a dearth, which means hardly any, actually no, planetary or moving stars traveling across the night sky. However, early in the morning, something is starting to put in an appearance before the sun comes up. Let's take a look at the sky here on our screen and see what's taking place. As the sky rolls over us, Pluto has just come over the horizon right here. Can't see it. And here below the horizon, what's this? Mars, Venus, Saturn, the moon, all showing up right there, coming up above the sky. And then just a little bit before sunrise, you can see Jupiter. Whether you can see it or not is another question. I'd like to stop it just right there. What kind of energy might we expect with this grouping? Mars, Venus, and Saturn, and the moon, all showing up in the early morning sky. And these have been showing up now for, except for the moon, and Mars and Venus and Saturn have actually been showing up in the morning sky for a week, maybe a little bit longer. And so this excites you. You kind of say, we've got something that initiates the pre-dawn energies each of these days. And what could it mean? Who are these characters? What might they have to, spawn for us as we consider what it is that is transpiring currently? Well, Mars, that's pretty easy. There's impulse, there's drive, there's energy. The sun, the sun down here, it's in, even though it shows it here in Pisces, it really is in Aries, in the tropical Western zodiac. So, being as it's the season of Aries, Mars is the ruler of Aries. So this pre-dawn energy that is being, let's say, illuminated, well, you can see from the sun's position that we're actually in the waning phases of the lunar cycle. Just a little bit of sunshine hitting the side of the moon. We're getting down to that, that crescent phase. And so Mars is the ruler of Aries. It's a driving impulse to do stuff, That's just how Mars works. Oh my goodness, phone is going bananas. I'm going to shut it off. I can't have all that kind of noise. And Venus. Venus is right there too, and Saturn. What kind of conversations? What dialogue might be transpiring between these? And on this day, which we're considering, which is Monday the 28th, the moon coming into that particular juncture, it enlivens the energy even more so than that Martian factor. It says that, can you feel this energy? Are you in tune with what it is that you want to sense about the conversation that's transpiring between this Mars, Venus, and Saturn? Venus is saying, with Mars right there, because those two have been dancing together for the last month as they went through Capricorn and are now in Aquarius. So their energies have basically been intertwined in a most unique fashion for, a long cycle. But Venus is the process of how do I utilize the energy of this moment to make a connection with others. This is Venus's, essence at work. And Mars being right there saying, don't just do it in a lighthearted way. Use my energy, be impulsive, be dynamic in how you commit yourself to engaging with others. Saturn, master of time itself, is right there in the mix. And it's the slow trudging energy in here. And the slower planets actually carry a lot more weight than those fast-moving personal planets do. And particularly in this case, the moon, which moves 12 to 13 degrees a day, is just going to flit right past these three planets in the same day. But Saturn, excuse me. What kind of a footprint in time is Saturn going to lay down for this energy of the Mars and Venus dancing together and illuminated by, what's little left of that lunar orb? As the person on top of the ziggurat in the morning, looking at this, I'm inclined to consult the oracle. I have an oracle deck here. I've already shuffled it. So let's see what the oracle has to say that might enhance or distract, or give us just a little bit of something to consider. What do we have? This is called the middle world. In the shamanic tradition, let's get that card out so I can keep it up for you. In the shamanic tradition, there are three worlds: upper world, middle world, and lower world. Lower world is a place where one goes to investigate and be with the energies of nature itself. It's populated by plants and wildlife. There's a deep sensing of the profound energy in this place that really, well, just from a general perspective, this is where one goes to tap into their power of their spiritual connection. The upper world is where one connects to the higher organizing energies of creation. Here are the potential gods and goddesses, those energy beings that awaken us to perspectives that perhaps are just a little beyond what we normally would tune into. Now, the middle world, which is the card that we drew for today, the middle world says this is an energetic aspect of the daily world that we live in. And when I express that, it's like, how to best describe that? This is the dream zone of the everyday world that we live in. And right now, we've just finished up with the cycle of Pisces. Or have we? That is the question. And I bring that up because there's still a lot of Piscean energy that's on the surface of much of what is going on these days. And the dream space with Jupiter, the ruler of Pisces, dancing through there, is allowing for a level of dream that we don't necessarily have with us all the time, generally. Shamanically, I wouldn't say that's entirely all the case. But for most of us, we get our dreams. Sometimes we remember them, sometimes we do not. But because this middle world card came up in the consideration for these particular planets conversation going on right now, might it be that there are factors in play between how our masculine and how our feminine energies are being blended in the process of time in a fashion that we should pay very particular attention to this? Might there be the terminology, disparate, unequal versions of that potential for human interaction with one another that is being challenged right now, particularly on the global level? I don't know that this is so much at the personal level where we as humans on this planet, but there are political and those kind of level of connections that are just a little bit out of balance. We'll say that's out of balance. Enough of the card for now. As a middle world consideration for how we're going to play this thing, because these three planets, not the moon, because the moon's only flashing through there, are only they're going to be essentially rising every morning about 5:30. They come over the horizon, and they're traveling at a pace that they're, for this next week in particular, that Saturn is going to be dancing there between Venus and Mars. One of the reasons that, what the visual of what you perceive if you happen to get up early in the morning is that there's a bright spot in the horizons, and on the horizon coming above the horizon that like 5:30 in the morning. And it's not too, well, maybe you might be able to perceive the individual players in that experience, but that isn't necessarily the case. Depends how good your vision is. There was a time when, we the astronomers would look out at these little tiny pinpricks of light up here in the sky and say, that is all there is. But, with the advents of the Hubble telescope and other telescopes, they've discovered that, these little pinpricks are just, one small evidence of entire galaxies of energy conglomerations transpiring in the depths of the celestial order. So these three planets, Mars and Venus and Saturn, throw them together into a blender and feel the energy with this moon coming across it here on Monday morning. Might there be opportunity to, without being too pushy, ask pertinent and direct questions of one another as to the long-term significance of what it is that we can do together. And that's kind of the energy that I sense comes into play currently as a overriding, underlying energetic consideration that should be with us to pay attention to. Anyway, just some thoughts before we go on to consider everything else that's happening this week. One of the factors, back there, well, let's go back to that one again. That was kind of fun. Is this Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter and Neptune are very close together. Jupiter is an energy that doesn't hold back. It doesn't matter what the consideration or platform is being considered. Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system, says, how can we enhance that? Are there ways that we can expand and grow this experience? Matter of fact, that's all that the consideration would be, is how can we take whatever the situation is and, and enlarge it in some fashion. It's in Pisces. So what are the deepest and most profound levels of observation about the meaning of life? Jupiter, the ruler of Pisces, being in that zone currently, is asking us to, not hold back with the potential considerations of how to play that particular level of interaction with the meaning of life. And this arises just, in that early dawn or pre-dawn scenario, saying, to the world, I, Jupiter, have arisen. And because of that, I want you to make sure that this day is not going to be about minor considerations. There are much more significant and large aspects that are on the table that we need to see if we can grow just a little bit more than we might be inclined to. And if you look at this, Neptune is there, but Neptune's so small. Neptune has a generational consideration to it. Neptune says into this Jupiter-Neptune dance that they're doing together is like, don't hold back on your imagination. There's a creative level of opportunity here being inspired and enhanced by this Jupiterian energy to be more, do more, fill out the experience that you're going to. Do not curtail your imagination of what might be the opportunities that are right there before you that you may be ignoring. Mercury traveling right here, heading toward the sun, which is something that it will be catching up to, is something that we'll discuss as we go through the rest of the week. Anyway, as you go through the day, actually, the night is now changing today because you can see the sun is above the horizon now. Can't see any stars anymore. No more of our moving compatriots. So here we go. Let's just let that scene disappear over the horizon. Let's go back to our two-dimensional world. And even to say two-dimensional doesn't do justice to the actual experience of what it is that we can investigate and what it is that we can live into. Well, let's take a look at the chart for this week. See what we can develop from that. Here it is, Monday morning, 8 o'clock. You can see our characters, Mars, Venus, Saturn, and the moon. They're all above the eastern horizon. So, and you can see the sun here, not quite risen yet. It doesn't look like it, where in actuality, it does rise a little before that. It's just that I'm using a 0 degrees Aries chart and set the thing for 8 o'clock in the morning. It looks like the sun hasn't come over the horizon. I suspect it has, because these things arise about 5:30 in the morning. So Monday, here we are. We've got all this, our conversations going on between these 4 planets, or 3 planets and 1 a luminary. Luminary. And it looks like one of the factors in play is that Venus and Saturn, they're at the same degree. Venus, how we engage artistically in our experience of investigating all the levels of potential interaction we might have with others. Right there on with Saturn. And Saturn can and sometimes is portrayed in the caveat of restrictions. So is it conceivable that some of our perspectives on how we express the possibility of interactions with others are not going to be received as generously as we might be intending to offer them? Yeah, that is one possibility. And because remember, the considerations for that are right now in that celestial conversation are asking us to pay attention to just how we play that interactive capacity that we have one with another. And with Saturn in the mix, I think we need to be not just cautious, but wise as far as the paying attention to what the opportunities might be that we wouldn't generally be aiming at. Because Saturn, yeah, restriction, but there are reasons for why restrictions actually transpire. And it may be, from a Martian perspective that always wants to, charge headlong into an experience in the true goat fashion, ready to ram with its horns into an experience, that isn't always the wisest approach to how we engage with one another. It can have some, redeeming challenges, shall we say, that, it's kind of like, why on earth did you run into me? And what am I supposed to perceive from your being such a butthead? Oh yeah, butthead. Did he say that? Yes, he did. And Saturn is saying, if you take that approach, pay very close attention to the response that you get and take it to heart. I think that we don't often put enough heart into that Venusian experience. And on this Monday, with the moon being in there, the moon is a representative for that heart connection, one with another. And to actually more than that, a heart connection to life itself. Okay. What else we got happening here on Monday? Well, yesterday, Sunday, Mercury transfigured itself and went across the border from Pisces into Aries. Think about Mercury. What do we think about? What inspires our level of conversation? And while it was in Pisces, it was a bit challenged. And I talked about that. I've already talked enough about that. It's in Aries right now. Aries is impulse. Aries is action. I think that it might be wise to make sure that you do some thought processes before that wagging tongue takes over, which it will not necessarily be the easiest thing to do, because Mercury in Aries is like, it is the blabbering tongue. It may not necessarily go out of its way to pre-think the words that leap off of it. So be aware of that. Think of the conversation of how we're interacting with one another. This is the overall flavor that this week is bringing, and consider, am I saying too much? Have I said too much? Do I have a capacity to listen? Mercury is the planet of communication, which is a two-sided coin. Yes, that wagging tongue can say an awful lot, but the other side of communication is, are you hearing what the other is trying to get through to you in between the wagging tongue? If you have the capacity to do the listening, you may find more appropriate uses of dialogue that could enhance some of that Mars, Venus, Saturn consideration that is in the air. Okay, let's go to Tuesday. Can't trust that day. No, that's Monday. Anyway, we now can see that on Tuesday, there's more of a sandwich. Venus has moved just beyond Saturn. The moon is gone into Pisces. These two planets, Jupiter and Neptune, are moving just a hint closer together. They will actually conjoin this month. Venus is moving ever so rapidly toward the sun. One thing that I noticed when I was looking at the actual movement of the planets was that currently all the planets, and the luminaries, they're all moving fast. So there's that kind of energy in the air that is like, you might sense a tension in the process of what could possibly unfold that's in the air. And it is something that wants to rapidly take place. It isn't about, oh, I could take my time. No, these planets, they all seem like they're in a hurry to be somewhere else or be somewhere where they're not, and it's us, we need to pay attention to that kind of energy to, with any luck or perseverance on our own parts, be able to recognize when it is time to, apply a little pressure to the brakes in our lives, and really do some thinking. I know this is all going to be a real challenge because of, several factors, that Martian energy, which is the ruler of Aries, Mercury, how we think and how we communicate being in Aries, the sun being in Aries. There is impulse and drive that is in the air right now. So I can't emphasize enough the need to use caution in what it is that you are attempting to accomplish, because this kind of energy doesn't continue on and on and on. And eventually you will have to meet the results of what it is that you set in motion right now. So don't hesitate to, if you sense that the process of what it is that's taking place in your life seems to be moving at a pace that is not easily kept up with. Utilize that Mars, Venus, and Saturn type energy to converse with others, and put your cards on the table and say, I feel this certain kind of energy at work. Have you got any kind of input that might be relevant to this that could be a benefit to both of us, or actually maybe to all of us? It isn't just a one-on-one type consideration, though that is the case at some points. Okay, on with the week. Wednesday finds. Let's see, if I take any notes about Wednesday. No, most of the stuff that I see happening happens like coming up and tomorrow. You can see now the moon has moved into Aries, where the sun is. It's 7 degrees away. Remember, the moon moves 12 to 13 degrees a day, which is basically about a degree every 2 hours. So that's 14 hours from now. We're going to have a new moon, and the new moon is going to be at 10, 11 degrees. Let's bounce this ahead a little bit. At 11, yes. There we go. That's close enough. At 11 degrees of Aries. And every new moon it's a beginning of a cycle. And the cycle takes on the flavor of where that lunar solar dance commences. I was just considering another oracle that I use, which is called Dane Rogers, an astrological mandala, which looks at the Sabian symbol for each of the degrees of the zodiac, which, well, I haven't done it lately because I haven't been writing these things out, but I just look currently to see what does the Sabian symbol have to say for this particular initiation point here in Aries, for all of us to consider as to how we might consider this next lunar cycle. Division. A young couple window shopping. And the keynote, the fascination of the youthful ego with the products of its culture. I majored in economics going to college, and I don't really want to go too far off on that tangent because it is basically formatted on theory. And the theory that it is based on has got some loopholes in it, which I think we can observe just by seeing what's going on culturally all over the planet with imbalance in economic. Here's a further discussion of this Sabian symbol. A woman waters flowers in her garden. This is the inward turned attention of the mind reveling in its own flowering. But now we have a scene that was probably the previous scene, symbolizing the outward longing of the ego, which has polarized itself and become man, woman. The man, in parentheses, quote, aspect is that part of the ego which craves direct participation with society and the world of other egos. Fully to participate requires a special kind of substantiation. And we are still in this third scene, the key word of which is substantiation. Clothes, goods of various types, adornment, and working tools are needed. The consciousness surveys possibilities. They are defined by organic nature, personal abilities in parentheses, and by the ambition to succeed in society. The ego becomes aware of what society has to offer. Its attention is turned outward, and interplay takes place between the individual and his culture. He is being molded by what he sees and by prospects for growth in social prestige. It is a phase of socialization of desires. Well, this is an Aries new moon. Impulse is always a part of the equation. But perhaps, just perhaps, the drive, this is a very Aryan type thing, to acquire things, which this particular lunar cycle is bringing to point, may require some forethought. In that moment where the I wants seem to want to take over, we might ask ourselves, do I need that which I want? And perhaps even a little deeper, why does this need show up now? Well, this is an interesting time for that because we've come into spring. Spring is the essence of nature erupting all around us, demonstrating its various forms of color and beauty. So perhaps the question might be more appropriate. Am I in some fashion trying to compete with nature? Should let that one sink in a little deeper, because it is a possibility that, I don't want to be upstaged by a plant. Yep. Thoughts roam far and wide as I bring up these words. Recently, a shamanic practitioner who was he was a plant shaman, passed away. His name was Elliot Cohen. And in his, this was just within the last couple of weeks, maybe not even that far back, who I've managed to listen and hear some of his explanations as to his connection to the plant world. And this may seem like it's an aside, but it's not as far aside as you might think. When his first plant that he was making connections to was plantain, which he used for healing, open sores, different kinds of rashes and that kind of stuff. And as he was becoming more in tune with all the aspects of this plant, he approached it, and one day it showed up in the form of a female figure. And the conversation ensued between them, where he was asking, how can I more effectively utilize the energy of what it is you as a plant represent in the healing process with other humans? And the conversation went back and forth. And as they were, getting ready to offer their salutations to one another and move off, she said to him, "Yes, I will help you in this quest that you have. But I want to let you know that there are a lot of other plants that want to participate in this endeavor with you." To which Elliot's response was, "Well, why didn't they ask?" And the response that came back from the essence of plantain was, "We have always been willing to participate with you human beings, but you have not asked." And I think that connection to this spring here in the Northern Hemisphere eruption of life is more relevant than we might give it credit, as far as, yes, there is a phenomenal amount of beauty. The cherry blossoms are erupting. They've shown them in Washington, D.C. and on the campus at the University of Washington here in Seattle. Phenomenal, gorgeous, beautiful, and it's not meant as something to be in competition with. It's the natural expression of life that comes forth at this time of year. And what we might be is more thankful for what it is that they bring to lighten and emblazon our spirits with a fullness of the eruption of that spring essence within us. Does it require, adornment of new clothes and stuff? Or does it really just require an awareness within our consciousness? And I'm not just limiting the consciousness to this brain, but to mind, which is enormous, and to soul, which is even more enormous. Which reminds me, a lot of people see the soul as being ensconced within the body. But the reality is that the body is actually within the soul. When we become aware of that soul aspect of who we are, we recognize that we are enormous soul beings. The containment within this physical body really doesn't do it justice. Welcome to spring. Now, where were we? Sometimes I get a little carried away. Actually, there's that Mercury in Aries. I must use caution. Okay, we've had the new moon. New moon is set in motion. And let's see, let's go back. Back one day. That new moon is on April 1st. You know, oh, the jokester day. Oh, we can play tricks upon one another. And it's kind of like, perhaps one of the more unique tricks that we might contemplate, and I'm not just pulling your chain here, is that on this 1st April, be an expression of spring. Spring is not there to fool anybody. It's not hiding anything. It's, it's full-on expression. And I was in a workshop over the weekend, last weekend, where it was factors were being considered about hunting for truth, and in the hunt, the emphasis seemed to be to hope that truth would be discovered. At which point my consciousness stepped out of the way and spirit ran through me and said, and the staying, I put it right there in the chat. I said, offer truth. Don't just hope for it. And this is something that inherently, I think, can go a very long way in how we interact with one another, how we interact with nature, how we interact with everything, and be in constant communication and contact with the celestial surround beings that are attempting, well, they're having conversations, and we should be attempting to pay attention to what it is that they are actually saying, because it has relevance to what we here on planet Earth might pay a lot more attention to in the development of our soul beings more efficiently. Whoever was monitoring that chat at the time must have seen something in it too, because the next thing I knew, there was a banner of that particular statement that I made that showed right up there on the screen of the presentation. I thank them, life thanks them, for allowing that aspect of the truth to not be just sequestered away. So we're here, we've made it to the final weekend of this we're going into the first week of April. And believe it or not, this is only the second week of Aries. And you can kind of see that the sun has gone into, the sun catches up with Chiron on Saturday. And we're going to go, how might we play with that chironic energy? There's a lot of translations of the archetypal mythological story of Chiron that we often attempt to contain or surmise in bullet point types of interpretation, like Chiron, the wounded healer. This is one you hear all the time. And the emphasis is often placed in that consideration upon the wound that Chiron experienced. And yet, how do we portray that in a fashion that the healing aspect has just as much, if not more, relevance to what Chiron stands for? First wound, abandonment by the parents. Some folks that have Chiron dancing in particular fashion in their charts are a little more aware of this particular type of wound, because in much or a substantial portion of modern or current familial scenarios, the connection between children and their parents doesn't always pan out as well as it could. I don't really need to say much more about that. You know, that kind of a scenario, what it does to a person's soul, I'm talking about the child's soul, and probably the parents at some level too, is it challenges it. It challenges it so deeply that actually aspects of their soul complex actually will fissure and separate from the soul matrix and go off to be somewhere else as they carry this soul wound within them. To, with any luck, be rediscovered as something that needs to be brought back to engage with and make whole again their soul awareness. Being aware of this potential, each of us has the responsibility, if we happen to know individuals in these circumstances, to be a lot more gentle with what it is that we can bring to them for their consideration purposes. This is the healing aspect of Chiron. Now, the Sun and Chiron on Saturday coming into that primary conjunction for this year, it does it every year, brings the sun's vitality. And I think we need to really be clear on how that solar energy makes itself available. Without it, it would be a very different life form that exists on planet Earth. I should say life forms, because the solar vitality, particularly right now here in the north with the spring, is the effects of it are everywhere. Touching Chiron this weekend, the potential for tuning into the breath of nature all around us has the capacity to tap so many potential healing avenues. I don't think many of us really understand that connection that nature and us share. We as human beings, our physical form is made up of all the minerals and components that are nature. Should we be recognizing that connection that we have with it? Absolutely, because nature and this physical being that we utilize are the same. Can you feel that? Can you feel that breath of spring exuding in and out? A connection to all of this life going on around us, awakening parts of us that may have been asleep. Because as we do that and really acknowledge our connection to this, that part of us that is soul grows. That is the purpose of why our soul incarnated with our body here on earth, is to discover ways that it can grow the soul experience and thus enhance all of life well beyond this small, focused, physical energy being that we spend perhaps just a little bit too much attention upon. So once again, I ask you, the pundits of the sales force are pressuring us at the moment to buy the latest, the newest, the snazziest, the most dynamic things to enhance this physical form that we inhabit. But does it really look big enough, large enough at the container of who we essentially really are? And the question comes, do I want this? Do I need this? Will it make the world a better place if I have it? I can't answer that for you. Only you can. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Oh, look at that. Mercury is in a superior conjunction to the moon, which means that Mercury is on the far side of the moon. And whenever a planet catches up with the sun on either side, whether it's on the interior or the superior sides, there are moments when it is said to be Cassimi, which means essentially translated in the heart of that solar experience. Think of the vitality that the sun represents. And now we take Mercury, how we think and how we communicate. What are the matrices of being there in that core heart place of the sun? Because when you are, what the Cassimi represents is it represents the sun offering to whatever plant that is. In this case, it's Mercury, how we think and how we talk, the opportunity to see what does it mean to be in the kingly, queenly leader position what would you actually provide to those in your kingdom if you found yourself in that position? Sunday, where are your thoughts going to go? How inclusive are you going to be of those within your kingdom? I'm thinking that that's probably where I'm going to leave it. The vortex of Indra's spider web of creation that has been the backdrop for this particular week can be seen to demonstrate how everything cycles round and round on the matrix of life. And we will find ourselves somewhere along this web of creation. Can you feel where exactly you might be? Are you out floating with potential, heading towards center? Or are you tightening up the energy of intensity as you draw to the core of where everything meets? Or are you allowing what it is that you have gleaned in the core to spread out and encompass as much as is possibly encompassable as the new cycle begins? This could be a representation of the new moon too. Enjoy the week. And thank you. We'll see what happens next week. Ciao for now.